For today's video, we're going to be changing it up a little bit from the one from every team and the top 10 lists and stuff like that, and we're just going to be talking about the Edmonton Oilers and the current position that they were in. I was thinking about this a lot last night, and there's a lot of things I wanted to say, a lot of things I wanted to get off my chest, and I thought what better way to do that than make a video on the current state of the Edmonton Oilers and some things I think have to happen for them to have some success next year. The first thing is pretty obvious, and that is trade Jesse Puljujarvi as soon as possible. You really don't want this lingering over the team, this drama, and you don't want to risk him going over to play in Europe and then you don't get anything in return and then you don't even get to have him in your lineup, and I don't think that is a situation that would work out well for the Oilers, and I think they should just try anything in their capability to move on from him and get him off the team. It was a bust of a draft pick, and now with Ken Holland as the GM, it wasn't even his pick, so it shouldn't be like an ego thing that he wants to keep him around and he still thinks he can work out at an NHL level like Peter Chiarelli probably thought he would. This is Ken Holland now. I think you should come in, just assert your dominance kind of as the general manager and just try to make changes here in Edmonton, and I think starting off you have to move on from Jesse Puljujarvi and just get this drama out of the way and try to do it as soon as possible, and maybe get a draft pick and a decent NHL player back, but honestly just anything in return for Jesse Puljujarvi at this point would be good for Edmonton. Moving along, we have Hope the Youth is ready to make an impact in the NHL. Pretty straightforward, but if this can happen, it would definitely fill a lot of holes for the Edmonton Oilers. The biggest one in my opinion is Kailer Yamamoto. If he can play in the NHL, and not only that, but if he can play up to speed and be on a line with Connor McDavid, that would just make the overall depth of the team so much better and fill a big hole that Edmonton, has been looking to fill for the past 2 seasons in getting Connor McDavid a winger and a consistent line mate, and I think Kailer Yamamoto hopefully can do that as soon as next year. And then you have guys like Tyler Benson as well, who maybe he can come in and produce some offense, and then you have defensemen like Ethan Bear, and then another important one in Evan Bouchard. If he can come in and play top 4 minutes and maybe even quarterback that power play, I think that would just make this team that much better. Obviously, I think there's a lot of what ifs for this Edmonton team next year, but if these young guys like Yamamoto, like Bear, Benson, and Bouchard can come in, then it obviously will put Edmonton in a much better situation than if these guys still aren't NHL ready and have to spend like another year in the American Hockey League. This next one is also pretty straightforward, and it is find consistency in the lineup. And I'm not talking about consistent play from the players, I mean have a consistent lineup. Don't be changing up the lines every second game. I remember this past regular season I would see on Twitter Edmonton's lines for tonight's game, and it would be like Jujhar Khaira and Milan Lucic with Connor McDavid, or like Zach Kassian and Sam Gagner with Connor McDavid, and every other night he had a new set of wingers. How is he supposed to find consistent line mates if you just give up after a couple games and keep switching it? I think they have to find some chemistry, you have to have patience, and try to see if something works. Like if they do bring up Yamamoto and decide to try him with Connor McDavid, if Yamamoto struggles at first, don't just pull the plug right away. Try it for a couple more games, and then obviously maybe if it still isn't working out, change things up, but don't have such a short leash because you really don't have the depth in your roster to do that. Next up, this is another relatively obvious one, and it is try everything to acquire a solid winger. Whether that is, attaching a draft pick with Jesse Puljujarvi, maybe trying to go after a guy like Chris Kreider or Nemestikov from the New York Rangers. I know they don't really have cap space, but try to work something out, try to do something, maybe a cheaper option like a guy like Brendan Perlini. I just think they need to do anything to get some more talent on the wing, especially if a guy like Yamamoto isn't ready to play in the NHL, because that basically just leaves them with the same team as last year, with the exception of James Neal coming in instead of Milan Lucic. And while if you ask me, that definitely is an upgrade on the offensive side of things, it isn't going to push the needle that far in terms of making them competitive and making them a playoff team. I just think Ken Holland should be constantly on the phone, talking to teams that are selling, talking to teams like the New York Rangers who have a guy like Chris Kreider who could potentially be moved for cap reasons, because if you ask me, the best version of Edmonton is not when Draisaitl and McDavid have to play together even strength. It's when McDavid is your number 1 center, Draisaitl is your number 2 center, and then Nuge as your number 3 center. That is a very good, three-headed monster at the center position. The problem is they just don't have the wingers to play with those 3 talented centers. Maybe you have to trade a guy like Nugent Hopkins to bring in a talented winger to play with a guy like Draisaitl or McDavid. I don't really think Edmonton wants to, explore the option of moving Nuge. But if that has to happen, then maybe it is something that Ken Holland could explore. I'm not saying they should just go right out and trade Ryan Nugent Hopkins, but honestly, me, anything should be on the table for this team to just bring in some more talent on the wing position. Now lastly, do not heavily rely on one goaltender. Mikko Koskinen, I think, had an okay year, but he did not deserve $4.5 million per year. Obviously another Chiarelli mistake, not something Ken Holland can really control, but again, he knew what kind of mess he was getting into when he got the job with the Edmonton Oilers. But I think this team isn't going to be good if you have to play like Smith or Koskinen for like 55 or 60 games. I think they should probably split that role and just try to make each other better and try to compete for that #1 starting spot. If Mike Smith can play in the regular season like he did in the playoffs for the Calgary Flames, where he kind of stole that starting spot from Riddick again, I think they'll be okay. And if Koskinen can just be solid and hold his own, then they should be okay in the goaltending position. But again, it's just another question mark and another thing that just makes me not confident about this Edmonton team whatsoever heading into next season. And honestly, I really want to be. I want to see the best player in the world in Connor McDavid in the playoffs, you know, battling against some of the other top teams. I really liked it. It was enjoyable when he made the playoffs in his second year. They won a round against the San Jose Sharks, and I want to see that again. But with the roster that they have right now, I honestly don't see them making the playoffs. And it's not like there's even much Ken Holland can do. Like I said, he knew what he was getting himself into, and he didn't sign all these bad contracts. And I know I said that he should go and do anything in his power to get a solid winger, but that is much easier said than done, especially when you have little to no cap flexibility whatsoever. I think James Neal has to bounce back and score 20. Alex Chiasson, I think, has to score 20 again. The young guys have to play well. The goaltending tandem has to do well. Like I said earlier in the video, there's just so many what ifs for this Edmonton team that it is really hard to have any confidence whatsoever in them heading into next season. But they do have the best player on the world in their team and a pretty good co-star in Leon Draisaitl, so anything is possible when you have that much talent up front. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens, but it should be a very interesting year for the Edmonton Oilers. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure you guys let me know your thoughts on the Edmonton Oilers current situation down in the comment section below, especially if you are actually a fan of the Oilers. I'm very curious to hear your opinions. And with all that being said, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in the next video.